And now Blender has more users than any other major 3D system in the world. And I think a lot of that is the cost, but it's only beginning to crack into the production pipelines of major filmmakers. So, yeah, Maya is what all the Hollywood studios use. Although I gather now Sony is starting to use Blender for pre-visualization, where it's not in the production pipeline, but anything made can be ported over. And as far as I know, at this point, 2 feature-length films have been made, one in Brazil and one in India. So it's slowly it's getting the user base and it's getting the technical base. And I also know that NASA uses Blender at some of their locations. And some people ask, well, can Blender get you a job? And I know, some animators who use nothing but Blender, but also when you make images of this quality, you can show that to any studio and they'll go, you've got talent. One fellow I noticed, I was at the SIGGRAPH job fair, and SIGGRAPH is the biggest computer graphics conference in the world. And I was at the job fair, I was circulating through there and stopped at one booth and looked over at the guy next to me, of course, and I noticed that on the cover he had a picture of one of these images, the one that's called Airman, and shows this little airman guy with his gun and his ammo band and everything. And that was made by a guy who was actually in the Army serving in Iraq. And he taught himself Blender just to keep from going crazy. But there he was, and I started talking with him, and I said to the lady at the booth, you ought to hire this guy. Well, I should have kept my big mouth open or shut, because my resume got put in the pile, and his got put in a special envelope. And now he's gone on and he's worked on Happy Feet, Silver Surfer, Spider-Man 3, and others. So Blender can get you a good job. Oops, sorry about that. Hit the wrong button. Supposed to hit the escape button, not the power. Oops. Come on, come on. Well, what got you interested to coming to this talk? What kind of things do you do? And you think you might be interested in Blender?
I'm interested in maybe doing a simple animation.
Technical or character animation? Or?
Yeah, just something that would be like maybe an animation of a logo, like a part of like a t-shirt.
Blender will do it very well. Yeah. Architectural concepts? Yeah, well, as you saw, a lot of architects are now using Blender for that. Yeah, I actually myself, I got in because I wanted to have a program that I could use to teach other people, the basics of 3D. And a seat of 3ds Max was like $2,500, so I couldn't very well afford to set up a class with that. And so I discovered Blender in SIGGRAPH one year when I was walking through the trade show floor, and this real tall guy handed me a CD and said, here's a free 3D program. And I was going, free? Yeah, right. Well, I started using it because of the classes and figured, well, sooner or later, I'll bump my head on what it can't do. And so far, in about 10 years, I've bumped my head once, where just, there was just something I couldn't do with Blender. So it keeps getting stronger, and it keeps surprising me. And my copy of 3ds Max sits on the computer crying. Because I don't enjoy 3ds Max's interface. And that's what really got me to Blender, was that after struggling with Max and doing stuff, but I just wasn't having fun. And so that's what really got me to Blender, was not its capability or not, but just in the beginning, it was just that for some reason I enjoyed using Blender. Maybe it was the fact that Blender is a two-handed system, so it keeps both your right hand and left hand busy, and you're not just always looking into far corners, say to blow up part of your screen or something so you can see it better. And Blender's organized so that unlike some of the other systems, there aren't any assigned windows. Is that any window you have can be, right now it's a 3D window, but it could be a logic editor window if you want. So you're entirely in control there. And Blender's, just like all the other 3D systems, you can rotate, you can scale, you can zoom in. But there again, each time I did it, one hand was on the mouse, one hand was on the keyboard. And for us ADD types, that keeps things interesting. And the windows I have now are the 3D view and the timeline. The timeline mostly lets you know where you are in the time, and the yellow stripes that you see are stripes that say keyframes. So here I have a simple animation of just the cube rotates and translates. And here are all the animation graphs. And you can turn them on or off as you like. So in something like this where it's not too much of a problem, it's good to see everything, but if you're working with hundreds and hundreds of objects, you probably just want to concentrate on one or two items. And you also, this allows you to set keyframes and move them around, so you can actually change the values. So you can see that just by moving the keyframe, you can adjust values. And if you're just trying to do something a little simpler, like you've got the motion down correct, and you just want to adjust the timing, you can just play with the keyframes themselves and just work on the timing. So you see, as I move them, since I'm staying in one spot in time, everything, the actual timing varies. Well, Blender's kind of unusual in that it also has a game engine included. And it's pretty easy to set up the game engine. Let's go. All you'd have to do is choose an object, choose some kind of sensor. In this case, I chose the keyboard, and I'll choose the S key. And then tell it, okay, do the sensor and some kind of actuator. And we're going to put some kind of motion in there. And so I'm just going to move it in X and then connect everything up. And now as I press the S key, it automatically changes it. And so if you're trying to, say, make a paddle for a game of Pong, all you'd have to do is add another sensor so you can move it in the other direction. We'll make that the D key. Add another constraint and a little more motion. And then just connect them all. Whoops. Oh, I didn't give it any motion. And so now if you had a Pong paddle, you'd be all set. And the game engine also allows you to texture the items. So you could add a texture. And now you can see the texture applied to it, and it works. And you can see that the lighting is affected as well. Well, I think now I'm going to step through the series of steps required to make a quick animation. You were talking about doing a logo animation, and so this will cover all the basic steps there. And going to do what is known as the butterfly demo. So first we delete the default cube and take a look from the top image so we can make our butterfly correctly. Let's see, let's get the camera and the lamp. So first thing I want to do is I want to know, what does a butterfly wing look like? And I happen to have butterfly wing picture, so I'll pull that out. And you don't see it. That's because this can be a perspective image or an orthographic image. An orthographic, all parallel lines are parallel to each other. They don't diverge or converge. So now in orthographic, we have an image of the butterfly wing, and you can see there's a circle with crosshairs, and that shows where the 3D cursor is, and I'm going to move the butterfly wing with respect to that. Whoops. So now we have it in place, and that will allow us to make it pretty easily. And I'm just going to start with a plane. Right now I'm in object mode where I modify the whole object. But if I press tab, I get into edit mode, and that edits particular parts of the object. And so right now I'm just going to delete one vertex and use the others to make my butterfly wing. Let's get rid of that. And since I'm trying to do it real quick, you could copy it in much more detail, but this will give us pretty good results. And now when I've got the final vertex made, I can join it with the first vertex. And now I've got the two joined, and then if I select them all, I can make all the faces of the butterfly wing that are necessary. Now here's one place where I like Blender in that you can just make any windows you need. And so I'm going to turn this on its side, and butterfly wings have a little bit of thickness, so let's just extrude it out. And now we've got a fairly thin little wing. And now I'm going to save it away just so I have a copy, because you never know when the power is going to go out or what. And also that will allow us to set relative paths to the Blender file, so that the textures and everything, we can move them around in a single directory and move them from machine to machine. So now we're going to make that butterfly wing texture. We create a new text or a new material, and now create a texture. And there are quite a few kinds of textures you can do, like clouds and marble, and really use them to get some very interesting effects. I've used the cloud effect to create waves on the ocean. So you don't have to just use them as they're labeled. But we're going to get that wing picture that we used to cut out the butterfly wing with, and we're going to use that as our texture. And now I've opened up the camera so that I can see what the camera sees. And now we can see the whole wing, and there we have a butterfly wing. Now you'll notice it's way too shiny here, and butterfly wings are fairly flat as far as color, because they don't really reflect much. So I'm going to go back there and make some adjustments to the material, and it will knock down the specularity, which is the shininess, and we're going to make it much harder so that it reflects back over a narrower range. And now you can see that you don't get the shininess, you just get the pure color, which is what you tend to get with a butterfly wing. And now I'm going to hide this away so I can work on the butterfly body. And this will also show Blender's layers. And Blender's layers aren't like Photoshop layers where they're all stacked on one on top of another. It's more like a series of cubby holes. And if you turn on the layer, you can see it. If not, you don't see it. And so I moved it to layer 2. There it is. I'm working on layer 1, so we're not seeing anything. And now I'm going to make the butterfly body with a NURBS curve. And right now it's just this little arc there. Won't do much, but we're going to add some points to it. And I just happen to know that it needs 13 to make its nice little curve, so that's how many I made. And I took the N3 and I collapsed them all into one place because a curve does not exactly follow where the points are exactly. If you look up here, you can see that the end of the curve is right there. But if you collect 3 of them together and put them all in one place, the curve will end in exactly the same place that they are. And one thing I've liked about Blender is that you have a lot of choice of where you put the center of your pivot or the center of your scaling. And I found in some of the other programs I've used this was a little more difficult. So right now I've just centered everything at where these crosshairs are. And so I can flatten those 3 points right on the plane. And now we'll move it, and you can restrict the motion of by just hitting the middle mouse button. And so that's where the tail's going to be. And this is where the head will end. Now that I've gotten those nailed down, I can pretty much make a nice little butterfly pretty easily. Now you can see that the little line with the arrows doesn't follow the where the lines with the points are exactly. And that's because it's curved, but when you're making the model, it's going to follow the curve with the arrows. So you can see the shape that we've got for the butterfly body now. And now I need to, now I need to make it round. So to do that, I'm going to make a part with an object with multiple parts, and I've made a Bezier circle to control the roundness of the butterfly. And now I'll connect it with the butterfly shape. Now it doesn't look like much of a butterfly, but once I put in the proper offset, we have a pretty accurate shape there. And there are no holes at either end or anything because we locked them all down to the zeros. And of course that will need a texture of its own. So we'll make one. Okay, and so we have the body with all its texture on as well. And now that we're done doing that, we can bring in the wings back, or the wing, and we'll move it back to the first layer. And I want, next thing to do is make the second wing. So all I have to do is copy it, and then we have a butterfly with two wings. So the next thing to do is attach the butterfly wings to the butterfly. And you just simply select the butterfly wing and the butterfly, and you parent the butterfly body to the butterfly wing. Now when I select the butterfly, whoops, that's not the wings move with it. And now it's time to do the animation, and that's pretty easy. What we want to do is make sure that we're on the first frame. And then we'll set some keyframes. And we're just going, we'll select both the butterfly wings and create rotation keyframes. And now what we want to do is make the high position of the wings. So we just grab each wing, rotate it till it's the top of its stroke. And then select both of these and create a keyframe at frame 5. So now we have the butterfly wing stroke. And now what we'll do is duplicate the flapping. So we've just done one half of a flap, but in the graph editor, we can turn that into a whole series of wing strokes. And we grab all the keyframes that we've made. Let's see, that doesn't look like all of them. and all we have to do is duplicate them. And just drag them over, and now we've got a complete cycle. And so now we have the butterfly wings flapping. We can make that as long as we want by, you can grab as many keyframes as you need. And so now we've gotten a frame of all the wing motion that we need. And next thing to do is animate the butterfly. And we start back at frame 0. And this one we're going to make a location and rotation because we're going to move that guy around. And I switched the center of the pivot point to median point because that way the butterfly rotates around itself, not around the center of the world. So it can do much sharper turns. I move it and rotate it and set a keyframe for location and rotation. Whoops. Well, we'll just start there. And set another location rotation keyframe at frame 50. Okay, now we have the butterfly flying all around. And there's one problem here, though. The camera isn't tracking it. So the butterfly's flying around, the camera's over there. But we can lock the camera down to the butterfly, so it'll, wherever the butterfly goes, the camera will look towards it. And so doing that, we choose the camera, and we put a constraint on it. And the constraint is that we're going to track the butterfly itself. So we choose the butterfly object, and we set it to a minus z-axis and set y up, and now it should track the butterfly wherever it's going. And you can see the butterfly gets farther and closer away. So what you'd want to do here is have some kind of cyc or something to display a background with flowers and trees and everything, so you could tell where the butterfly is moving. And so it's pretty simple to set up an animation and have it go. I wish I had a little more time, or I'd sit there and adjust. You could adjust the timing of the wing beats so that some are slower, some are faster. You can make the butterfly go up and down. But these are pretty much all the steps that are needed to create a little animation. Are there any questions? Well, the best recommendation I have is that I wrote a book that was just focused on learning the interface. Because we looked at the market out there and people were still going, well, I don't get it. It's a little strange at the beginning, but once you sort of go through the steps, it becomes pretty obvious, and most important, it becomes fun, flexible, and fast.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the interface was really built for somebody who uses it day in and day out. It's just, there's so much there. So half the things that you point to, I couldn't find them again if you said Black Pro.
Yeah, well, I think any 3D system at this point is that complex, because you're really talking about some very complex controls. But what my publisher and I did is that we looked at all the beginning books and we said, what's missing here? And so my book, you don't even really build anything for the first 4 chapters, because we're really going through and getting the fundamentals down of, here's how the Blender Windows works. Here's how you can make a new window. Here's how you can shut one down.
So about how many hours would it take for someone to get to the point where they could do this demonstration kind of naturally and take bumping into a lot of fluent learning?
Probably a week to 2 weeks, depending on how much time you had. And I was making that as sort of all the time. I haven't really timed anybody doing my book, so I can't say how fast they go through it. But I do know that another friend of mine, he wrote Blender for Dummies, and he would give these week-long camps to the kids, and the kids, would just pick it up like that. So it really isn't difficult, and the big hurdle is that you just have to sit down and do it, and you're teaching your hands what to do, not your head. Oh, well, thank you.
Very powerful.
Yeah, it actually it's always surprised me. And one thing I like about Blender is that the user group is worldwide. They're very active because Blender says, look, we're giving this to you for free. These are great kids. Pay it forward. And so my way of paying it forward is I come to Python conferences and tell people, try to help people learn how to connect Python and Blender, or write books, or even if you just help your friend, or you sit down and make something cool with it.
So this does a lot of solids 3D type modeling. But what about things like that much more complicated, like fire and hair and things like that? Are there plugins or?
Yeah. There are a lot of plugins for hair. They've really gotten hair down pretty well. Clouds and fire, believe it or not, have the same root, is that they're both particles. And fire just moves faster and has more color. So you start out with the solids and work on getting reflection and shiny surfaces and flat surfaces, and start playing with particles and start doing character animation. But like with most 3D programs, you don't ask where's the end of the learning curve, because it isn't there. There's always something new to learn. I mean, I've been doing 3D since the middle 80s, and I think I'm as far up the learning curve as I used to be 20 years ago. But there's so much more to learn. But it's cool stuff.
So we're watching like a preview, right? Is there a
Yes.
rendering step that's?
Yeah, I could do the rendering. I just don't have time because technically they're supposed to kick us out now. And so go to blender.org to download a copy of Blender. And if you want help and stuff, go to blenderartist.org. And you can look them up. Just think of Blender Artists or Blender. If you want a book that will just step you through everything, Blender 3D Basics. Mm-hmm. I believe the ebook is about $16, and there are various packages of the book and the ebook. You can get it at Amazon or at the PACT Publishers website. And it's cheaper at their website.
How long did it take for you to write it?
About a year, everything considered.
If it helps as far as like sitting every time anyone for your book, I sat down at the very beginning about maybe a year, not a year ago, about maybe 6 months ago, and I actually sat down to do it. And for about 3 to 4 hours a day, 4 days out of the week, I went through the first maybe 7 chapters, and I got fairly comfortable with it. I mean, I can complete the whole book, but I'm more comfortable than I was at the beginning, obviously. So it was really helpful. And it was one of those ones where once you, like you said, once you sit down to do it, and your body kind of, or your hands memorize what was supposed to be done afterwards, it was like, well, what do I want to do with it now? That's gone through the tutorial. So
Yeah, and my book was aimed mostly to get you familiar enough that then you could go like the Blender artist and you'd understand what they were talking about.
yeah,
And so once your hands understand, then your mind can apply itself to the real fun parts.
yeah,
'Cause the fun part isn't typing; it's going, oh, hey, I want to design a butterfly that glows in the dark and can attack cities and will basically take over the desktop. Well, thank you.